Peace, everyone. Welcome back to another Barter and Bill Think Tank broadcast. Today we are talking about our beloved ancestor, revolutionary Malcolm X, and I have my brother Jared here pretty soon. Um, and also, we have some people in the chats that might pop in also if they want to be a part of the dialogue. But so Jared, you can say what's up to the people if you want, but then we'll get started.
Yeah, sure. What's up? What's happening? It's good to see you and all those who will see it live and later. Peace to everyone. Welcome.
Absolutely. So I wanted to kind of start with this. I don't know, these last couple of years I've been on this chronology type thing. I like to see who was doing what when, and I don't know how weird it is, but it's kind of fun to know that uh, this person was this age when this person was on Earth or whatever the case would be. So I wanted to kind of like go over certain dates in Malcolm X's life and then what was happening at these different ages. So obviously he was born on May 19th, 1925, and he was taken from us on February 21st, 1965. So 40 years young. And so one of the first significant, one of the most significant things that I guess happened when he was young, 6 years old, his father was hit by, I guess it was mysteriously hit by a car, but I'm hearing that, or I'm reading that the KKK was involved in some kind of way, but he lost his father at 6. But when you started looking at some of the events that was going on in the world,
track, that on a train, yeah, that's what it was. That's the story was. It's a train track, and then the debate is always, or the question is always, to what extent is there evidence to support that the Klan actually did it?
Mm-hmm.
There are other versions, including that he took his own life. But anyway, yeah.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, I get it. I think we talked about this a little, but I think ironically, the mysteriousness around Asafo's death, and his son is like 5, so and Asafo wrote a lot about MX. It was kind of like nostalgic or traumatic a little bit in a way.
No, I get it.
Yeah. So one of the things, the Harlem race riots was going on when he was 10 years old. You had the Beaumont, Texas uprising, and the Detroit uprising was going on. He was 18 years old. And these are just some of the, the more documented ones, but I'm pretty sure there was a whole lot of things going on in between these times. You have Columbia, Tennessee uprising when he was 21 years old. You got the Peekskins, New York uprising when he was 24. Oh, I'm sorry, Peekskill, not Skin. Peekskill when he was 24 years old, but also when he was 23, that's when he was locked up and I guess transitioning to converting into Islam. And then you have the Hillard Brooks Jr. murder in Montgomery when he was 25. You got Trumbull Park Holmes uprising when he was 29. Ole Miss uprising when he was 37 years old. You have Cambridge, Maryland uprising when he was 38 years old. And he predicted a bunch of uprising in 64. He said, our people are going to become less nonviolent. And so you have another Harlem uprising, Rochester, Jersey City, Patterson, Elizabeth, Jersey, Chicago, Philadelphia when he was 39 years old. And then obviously, even after his death, 6 months later, you have your Watts happen. So when you think about this constant terror, and you see stuff like Buffalo, like what comes to mind when we think about some of our leaders, right? Because again, we reading back to our leaders, and then sometimes we say today is different or things are different, but even the things that we experience in the day, like our leaders throughout their whole life, I'm not sure that we could say things have changed drastically. Like when you think about that chronology, you think about those things that was going on. Like how do you, I guess, interpret that with then and now?
Well, I would also just want to add, as is often done, that that 1925 is also the birth year of Patrice Lumumba and Frantz Fanon, so that sort of Pan-African uh, troika is formed, and that also speaks to the context that Malcolm grew up in. That there were all of these international struggles, the Cuban Revolution, the Congolese Revolution, the struggle for independence all throughout Africa, in Ghana's independence, Sudan's independence. Um, he's definitely influenced by Robert and Mabel Williams for in terms of armed struggle. So I mean, there's definitely Ho Chi Minh and the struggle in Vietnam. And it turns out he and Ho Chi Minh both worked in the same Boston restaurant. I'm not sure at the same time, but at the same restaurant in when So I mean, it's anyway. So I and to your specific question, what I end up often thinking about is that the material conditions faced by people all over the world, in many cases, Black people in particular here, are worse than during his lifetime, and things are more intensified than in his lifetime. The key difference is in the suppressive capability and tactics of those in power. Uh, uh, which in my own focus is often around the popular culture of depictions and media representations and the narrowing of discussion and narratives that are brought to bear on those worsening conditions. But so that's of course what I think about. And then when you have what took place in Buffalo, the first thought that I have is, I mean, it's I think not coincidentally is that the response that is projected and popularized and promoted is often one that contradicts the kinds of analyses we would have gotten and interpretations we would have gotten from Malcolm and those like him. That his assassination and then subsequent assassination image creates a vacuum in a space into which a lot of, I think, lesser and ignoble actors can step in and offer up their critiques and their so it's something that I've invited for us to talk about on my platform tomorrow. Is that's part of it, that so much of the response that is promoted and encouraged that we're getting from prominent Black and other voices is the Republican Party is the sole blame for everything, which tacitly leaves or implicitly leaves room for the Democrats to be given credit or potential for being in opposition. And of course, it was Malcolm that popularized. He didn't invent, but popularized the criticism that one is the fox and the other is the wolf, in terms of the Democrat and Republican parties. So anyway, I mean, that's those are just some of my initial thoughts on it, and I see Brother Diallo's here, so I'll let him jump in.
Yeah, peace, Brother Diallo. So yeah, I know you had to take care of some business this morning. So what we did, we went over the chronology first, and then talked about how throughout his life you have uprising, revolts, situations in different cities, and then obviously tying it into things haven't changed, or even as Jared suggests, things have gotten worse. So you want to kind of jump in and say whatever you can right quick, if you can hear us. Yeah.
He says he can't hear.
Oh, can't hear you. All right, so try to go back in, leave, jump out and come back in. I can hear you now.
Oh. All right, I can hear you. The headphones aren't working.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, so pretty much what I was saying was we
Man,
went over like a chronology of things that was going on in the world or in America throughout Malcolm's life, and how they like mirror some of the things that's still going on. It's like a consistent terror or violence. And Jared suggested that things are even worse now than it is uh, than it was then. So, you want to share
oh,
anything about
I'm
that?
late. I'm sorry for being late. I got a call this morning. My son was like, someone brought a gun to school and they're searching all of us. And they're
Mm.
searching all the kids. And of course, my wife is like, okay, shut it down. We homeschool him and never let him out the house again. So, but it turns out someone brought a gun clip to my son's school. It wasn't even a gun, it was a clip. And they were wanding all the kids and wouldn't let anyone in or wouldn't let anyone out. It was a crazy morning. So, I mean, I would probably try to get on here and debate if things are worse then or worse now than then. But now I just, man, it's crazy. Sorry.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry for
No, no,
being late. I
no.
No, it's all good. I get it.
uh,
We had a couple months ago. We had like a social media version of that, where somebody, apparently some kid in one of our daughter's schools, was on social media talking about, I'm upset and I'm gonna go shoot up the whole place. So it created a whole. So I get it, and I get your wife's
yeah. And
tendency to
I don't even know.
homeschool them and don't ever let them out the house again.
Yeah, right. And that's why I had to run down there and quell all that. Like, oh shoot, him here all day, every day. Nah, let's yeah. So yeah, and
So
I think I don't know, they didn't tell us which child did it or even what grade he was in, because it goes from like
Yeah.
kindergarten, 8th grade. And so they keep you they just tell you all the horrible stuff. They tell you all, they don't give you any details. I let him stay at school. They said it was a clip and they were wand. And I'm thinking, did the kid bring a gun for his own protection? Hearing about the Buffalo shooting,
That was brought up.
On the south side of Chicago.
Sorry, go ahead. You broke up there for a second.
Oh yeah, I'm just saying, children we used to go to the gym before the pandemic. We would get up with my older son. He's in college, but with my oldest son, when he was in high school before the pandemic, we would get up early in the morning and strike out for the gym before work and before he had to go to school. And we would be passing dead bodies because we'd get out coroner truck. We'd get out to collect the bodies. Remember when I first moved here, there was a sister who was like, every morning I take my kids to school, we stepping over these, and I'm like, sis, you ain't got to exaggerate like that, And she moved her whole family to Ghana. She left south side of Chicago, and when she put that online to her, I used to do activism and community work and gardening with her, and I thought, that's hyperbole. I'd been here just a few months, and I'm like, stepping over bodies, come on. And then it happened to me, and I'm trying to like take a different direction. We'd ride our bikes. And so I'm like, oh, let's go down, see the tape. And I see the meat truck, they call it, to collect the bodies. It's crazy here in Chicago.
So I want to ask a question I want to ask a question that might set the Diallo off, and I don't know how Jared can respond to it. But so preface this way: there was a prominent young leader in Baltimore who made a comment on one of our platforms about like the reason why the conditions in Baltimore are the way they are is because there are no strong black families in Baltimore. And so at that time, Asafo was on the platform, and Asafo went off on him, pretty much calling him a pork chop nationalist. But people was, they were struggling with, Asafo addressing him that way because they know his heart. But I asked that because there's this point of Malcolm's life where he believed that the Nation of Islam was a cleansing thing for him. It was a moral tool for getting him morally sound, shall I say. And so I wonder again, learning from his life and then what we know now, how do you feel about this concept of like, we need to clean ourselves up and fix our behaviors before we can really confront our conditions, or fixing our behaviors will change our conditions? Like, how do you feel about, again, that, and then reflecting on Malcolm's idea of how the Islam cleaned him up?
You want to?
Either one of y'all can go first.
Go ahead, Diallo.
Well, I'd like to say there were no strong Black Jewish families in the Warsaw Ghetto. There were no strong Jewish families in the Krakow concentration camp. I get sick of this I call it fetishization of the Black family. They're fetishizing a situation, and this a mythological past. That's literally one of the components of fascism, mythologizing a grand past that never existed in terms of the strong Black. And I don't even know what that means. I was just talking about my father-in-law. He came from a very prominent family in Macomb, Mississippi, and his father has monuments named and iconic. He was an activist in Macomb, Mississippi. He moved here to Chicago and became a labor activist. He's in that picture where Dr. King came here to the north side of Chicago, and the white racists were pelting where Dr. King said he's more violence in the north. My wife's grandfather is in the picture guarding Dr. King from those bricks. And he had what they call, he was today, if he was here today, he'd be a high value alpha male, Black family, all that nonsense. And every day he was literally hounded all over the country, dealing with lynching his own sons. My father-in-law would, again, just like you were saying, would go to school in Macomb, Mississippi, and see lynched bodies. See the aftermath of a lynching on the way to school. So, number one, strong Black families, as they understand it, is not a bulwark or a defensive unit against systemic oppression, state-sponsored or ingrained. And they're always, it's just easier to fantasize and fetishize the Black family unit than it is to confront an armed, entrenched aggressor. So they start looking for all these solutions that allow them to imagine that they're confronting the problem without challenging institutional power, entrenched power, armed, entrenched power. So you talk about family, you talk about pulling your pants up, you talk about all these non-solutions that we have a historical timeline to look at when we were wearing suits and we were had high marriage rates, and we had all these things they fetishized, but yet our condition of oppression had not changed.
I think Diallo, sometimes your signal going in and out, so I think we caught it, but sometimes going in and out.
Sorry about that.
No, it's cool. It's cool. So Jared, I mean, I guess you can add to that, and also kind of keeping in mind, expressing your thoughts about Malcolm's feeling about, like, he don't feel like he could have been who he were without the nation. It cleaned him up, and is that and something that we should take on? Go ahead.
Let me just, because I'm sorry I didn't speak to that part. I, for one, don't buy into the fact that Malcolm was cleaned up by the nation. I think that Malcolm's development was arrested when he joined that cult. Malcolm was a member of a cult. He didn't join, it's not the university. It's not an educational or even a political organization. It was a religious cult. So I think that, again, is part of Nation of Islam branding and marketing, more so than the reality of Malcolm's life and experience.
So again, I admit this is one of the few areas where I admit there's bias. So I don't disagree entirely with what Diallo said, but I would phrase it slightly differently in that, and I have to say I Well, I'll say it this way: my brief and limited encounters with some of the rank and file in the nation over the years has had an impact on me. So I recognize that at a certain level, there is this important role that is played by the nation in giving people, particularly in the cases I'm thinking of, young men who come up in particular levels of distress, giving them room to catch their breath, and gain some self-esteem and some pride and some direction. But at the same time, I see it. I do ultimately end up seeing it in a lot of ways, the same way I saw the Navy, for instance, do that for me. And sometimes, to a lesser extent, prison does this for other people. That there are these institutions that they are not necessarily designed with our best interests at heart, but at times do give us some room to, as I say, get some direction, slow down, catch our breaths, get out of that speeding lane of destruction per se. But yeah, so and Malcolm, at least, even when he was in his most heated exchanges publicly and privately, from what we know with the Nation of Islam, he still gave them credit for that. He still gave Elijah credit for that. So we have to at least honor what Malcolm was saying about the situation, even as he was condemning the behavior and the actions and noting the limitations of the structure itself. But I mean, he was also clear. He had to break with them. He wanted to build other institutions. He wanted to go in different directions. He was, at the time of his assassination, he was building the Muslim Mosque Incorporated and the Organization for Afro-American Unity. He was endeavoring to develop guerrilla warfare operations. He was endeavoring to build bridges with the more mainstream, so to speak, wing of the civil rights movement. So he recognized, and of course, build internationally. So he did, he recognized that for whatever good the nation had done for him and for others, it was limited and was a box out of which he and the rest of us would have to come if we're going to actually have a revolution. And to that extent, I mean, that was part of the conflict that I think he had with the nation, that he was saying, to the way I heard Diallo's point, that yeah, we can have good families, we can even clean ourselves up, we can pray, we can stop drinking liquor and doing drugs, we can have our families and et cetera and so forth, and we're still oppressed, and we're still colonized, we're still getting shot down, we're still, that isn't the cause. So when I hear people, my joke has always been or for a long time been something to the extent, something around, I hope everyone does buy into that mythology of the so-called pork chop nationalists, that we clean ourselves up, get our families together and all of that. And then we would, by midday of that day, we would be ready to, form a more concrete revolution, realizing that none of that has anything to do with the oppressive conditions we find ourselves in. Nobody is oppressed because their pants sag or because a family divorced. A couple divorced. That's not the cause of the inequality that we suffer. And to that point, I mean, and I'll stop here. I agree with Diallo on the incessant comparisons to Jews or otherwise. The problem, of course, is that on the one hand, people will do this acknowledging how African people are different and in some cases better than these other groups, and yet will say we should emulate these other groups for pathways to freedom, not recognizing that it is in that very difference that causes the inability to do that in the first place. So even just, again, it's been recently made brought back for me on a personal level. And I think, I've avoided it to avoid some personal trauma, but the broad comparisons that have that honest economists have always used in showing the at least material break in the differences between Black and Jewish communities is the access to goods and services and space in the economy to Jews that were never afforded to Black people. In other words, it had nothing to do with family structure, culture, patterns of personal behavior. It was strictly about do Jews, specifically after the Second World War, do Jews get access to the VA loans home and business, etc., and GI Bill, and Black people do not. So in my own family, I was asked to look at that. My Black father came back from World War II, just like my Jewish uncle did, and one family went in one direction and one went in a very different direction. And I just have to find a way to maneuver through the family nonsense to get to the personal details, but the broad strokes are clear. So the point being, again, Black people can't do, even if they did do what Jews and other groups do, cannot be given the same access and benefits for that, because the relationships to these countries, to these power centers, to the people in control, et cetera, and so forth, are very different. The relationship to the economy is very different. So anyway, and Malcolm was clear on that. That's why he started with his revolutionary nationalism, wanted an internationalist, diaspora-led revolution.
Right. So I wonder. So I remember Diallo talked about, and I don't know if this was one of our Friday shows, when he talked about. So Kevin Samuels, he put this work in, and when he left here, he's judged on at least the last segment of his life of what he done, or maybe the whole. I'm not sure, but when you look at Malcolm, he was no, I'm sorry. When Garvey died, he was 15, right? And he was just about to go to Boston for the summer to kind of have this epiphany of like seeing all these Black people. But then his father died, who was a Garveyite, when he was 6. So, his father obviously not being there in a situation with his mom. And so when you think about that, like if Malcolm X transitioned in jail or in the streets or whatever before Islam came in contact with him. Now, granted, I'm pretty sure Diallo and anybody else could say that, okay, well, Christianity could have got him. 5%, like different people could have got him and helped him get there. And so should we be giving so much credit to this structure, especially as we get into the latter part of how they kind of broke off? But just these different stages in people's lives, and maybe he feels indebted to him, indebted to them because of what they did to his material conditions, and maybe I ask, like, should a healthy organization teach him not to give them all the credit? Like, would a healthy organization said, "No, I didn't save you"? I don't know how you feel.
Listen, at every opportunity, I cut my organizational teeth in the National Black United Front. It was the most engaged and well organized Black organization, conscious, militant, even Black organization in Kansas City when I was growing up in the Midwest. And a Jamu Wrestler, Samori, and them brothers. Even though, we have some divergence in ideas and methods, I say all the time, that's where I got my political education, my organizational mentorship, from the National Black United Front. But if they freaking firebombed my goddamn house and murdered me in front of my wife and kids, I'd be pissed if people were running around for decades talking about what they did for me. All that shit cancels the fuck out. And it blows my mind. It literally blows my mind that we still have a debate about the nation's impact on Malcolm. I mean, seriously, I don't know. I mean, what do you have to do to lose those props? Like, seriously, what does a cult have to do for us to stand back and say, hey, I don't give a damn what y'all did. Y'all contributions do not weigh what you extract. And we want to talk, and even Farrakhan, because even if the people want to talk the FBI and all this shrouded mystery around his death, but I quote, if we dealt with Malcolm like a nation is supposed to deal with a traitor, then what business is it of yours? If we dealt with Malcolm the way a nation is supposed to deal with a traitor, what business of it is yours? And then for them to turn around and talk about, we cleaned up Malcolm. Malcolm, and people always ask me all the time, because I am a great admirer of Malcolm. I'm constantly quoting and referencing Malcolm. You know, I got Malcolm images on the walls of my home, and they're like, "Oh, you're an atheist. Malcolm wouldn't have been an atheist. You wouldn't have been with Malcolm." And I wouldn't have joined. And I say all the time, I would not have joined Malcolm while he was a member of a cult and advocating for a cult and getting people to join cults. And if you go back and read the writings and look at some of the recordings of Malcolm when he was in a cult, he was saying utter nonsense about eyebrows, our hair being the texture of our eyebrows, and big head scientists. It was nonsense. It wasn't until Malcolm started his own independent study with Dr. John Henry Clark and started looking at actual history instead of the mythology that he was indoctrinated into in the cult that he started making sense to me. And I greatly admire that even though he was in the nation that he taught self-defense, and that was common sense shit that we had before. He didn't need the Nation of Islam to tell him about to defend yourself and to arm yourself. He was doing that before the nation. The nation gave him miseducation, and the nation is still miseducating black people all over the country. Farrakhan went around telling black people that Allah will protect them from the COVID virus. To this day, they've been feeding misinformation. They claim they had the cure for AIDS back in the 90s and 80s. I mean, come on. And we just keep giving them passes because they got a great aesthetic and some great rhetoric, some halfway decent rhetoric. You know, it was Nation of Islam that got me off of pork, you know, when I was in middle school and a freshman in high school, and eventually led to me being a vegan. It was their rhetoric and their literature. But when I go back and read their literature about nutrition and how you're supposed to eat, it's nonsense. Can we just grow up before a whole new generation of we lose another young revolutionary to this cult? Because yeah, they do find young people in a very vulnerable state in life. Or young people that are dealing with people living in ravaged communities, and they go there and tell them we have the solution, this pie in the sky nonsense, and get them to behave. And that is part of the BITE model that cults and doctrine, behavioral manipulation, behavioral change. But what is the ultimate end? If I got to clean you up with lies and nonsense, am I truly cleaning you up, or am I embedding you into a new form of filth? Cults don't cultivate. We can cultists awake ourselves or to organize our people. It always collapse, erodes, and collapse. Every single don't cultivate.
So I don't know, Jerry, if you have any.
Yeah, if I can, I just because I want to be clear about. I appreciate the points and certainly the energy, Brother Diallo. I just want to be clear that I don't think it's giving the nation or anybody undue credit or room to acknowledge, just objectively, historically, and certainly in terms of what Malcolm said himself, even up to the end of his life, that the nation did have a positive impact on him. Up to a certain point. That's it. So certainly I don't not only do I not advocate that people join the military, I actively work against people joining the military and actively work against the mission that the US military works for, or the ends to which it works. But if we're being honest, and if I'm being real, if I'm telling the truth about my own story and that of some others, we would have to acknowledge that there was some positive impact individually on my life by having that time to blah, 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 blah. That's it. That's all I'm saying. So it's not to give the nation credit, it's certainly not to encourage people to join. In fact, really my point would be that more of us need to do more work, myself included, building alternative holdover spaces where the kind of work I'm talking about can occur without people having to go into the nation or without going into the military or going to prison. So I just wanted to just be clear about that. But I fully, appreciate the points that Diallo's making about that the final analysis, so to speak.
So I wonder, despite or other go ahead, Diallo.
No, and where you to speak to, because I do the same that you do with the Navy. The Christian church helped me. you know, my grandmother, I grew up in the projects, drug culture, gang culture, lost one parent to incarceration. And my grandmother took us into the Christian church. And I didn't do drugs. I didn't join the gang. I was known as a neutron or a buster in my neighborhood, and everybody know them the church boys. Me and my brother and my older sister, my grandmother would herd us off to church 4 or 5 days a week for hours. And I could credit the church with keeping me out of the streets. When my friends were out, you know, many of my friends ended up doing a bid or time. Some of my friends didn't make. I could probably credit the church, but then that overall, the impact of the Christianity, oppression, resource rape, and colonization. So even if we extract some personal gain from organization and institution of belief system, we like you said. So I'm just reinforcing what you said. A lot of times we'll try to look at these minute goods, these small goods that they do, but the overall sum total of the impact. And you know, I even had a direct experience where you talk about the nation building. I was had an idea to set up a series of cooperative martial arts studios around Chicago to allow these boys to exert their aggression, get rid of a lot of their angst and anxiety, and still just, you know, everything people claim martial arts do for young people. And I gathered a bunch of conscious martial artists all around, and we started a facility, and we set up a cooperative business structure where it was community and cooperatively owned, and we set up a pay scale that was based on children's ability to pay from absolutely free to you know, the standard fees. And I was sat down, and I was relatively new to Chicago, and the martial arts, I didn't know the Nation of Islam has a very strong presence in the Black martial arts community here in Chicago. There's a huge martial arts community, and many of those younger brothers were trained by Fruit of Islam members. And they came and told me, yo, you talking all this stuff about the nation, and it's going, you know, nobody's going to come to your school. You're not going to get any type of sanction, no type of support. Instructors won't support it. And just you talking, I'm like, well, okay, what did I say that was wrong or incorrect? Did I say anything that was untrue about the nation? They can't, because I'll go publicly and say that I was wrong about this or I was wrong about that. Just tell me what I said and give me the counter argument or the counter evidence. And they were like, no, you just can't say it. And I'll just say this and I'll leave it alone. We can go back to Malcolm. I've been in the conscious community and the cultural activist community since I was 14 years old. I've met literally hundreds of Black people that were intimidated and afraid of the Nation of Islam. I never once in my life of activism met a white person that was intimidated or afraid of the Nation of Islam. And I'll leave it at that.
So I wonder, apart from, you know, obviously Islam's impact on Malcolm, what is there other things that you've seen, you've heard over the years that was misinformation about Malcolm X? So you can start with Jared, but some things that either people got wrong that's total misinformation that you would disabuse people from.
Well, the obvious and the big one that's often debated are the claims of his homosexuality, which for me is less an issue than it is a bad historical method applied to the claim. And then the attempt, I think, politically of the claim to create confusion and hostility and even discouragement among those who have been conditioned and encouraged to see Malcolm in particular for young men as our shining manhood. But it's simply that it's not, for me at least, an issue because honestly, if it were fully proven that he was gay or bi or whatever, I would have very little change in my feeling towards him, and little in terms of my views on an analysis as to why he was assassinated and why he continues to be an image assassinated posthumously. but the simple fact is there's just no evidence for it, and the methods behind the claim are just poor. But there are others that, you know, in terms of for me, Malcolm, like many others, are brought up in symbol and image, absent a lot of the context and accuracy and the points that they're trying to get to. So just in general, what I'm always pointing to is that very rarely, and in fact, I don't think I can think of any examples in terms of pop culture, media, academic work, where the politics and ideas that Malcolm worked with that made him a threat are put front and center and actually engaged properly. So in other words, his Pan-Africanism, his support for armed struggle, his affinity, at least, for socialism, his critiques of imperialism and colonialism. I mean, all of, you know, his expanding work in the OAAU around gender, improving his own relationships politically to women, and in terms of their involvement and leadership. All of this, I think, is dealt with insufficiently in favor of the sort of with his own, to be fair, with his own contribution in terms of the way he intentionally wanted the autobiography to work in the public sphere. But all we usually get are the general vague, or I think made vague, or no, I shouldn't say that. Either we get the vague issues about his transformation, or we get an intense focus on the transformation, specifically to paint the Nation of Islam as the problem and more mainstream politics as the solution. And all of that framing, for me, in terms of how Malcolm is approached, or specifics about his life and history that are or are not dealt with, are the main issues that if you even in the way that Brightman and Pathfinder and all of them sort of took with their own specific intent and focus around socialism, presented some of his speeches and etc. But even in that work and others of his published speeches, you hear in his own delivery an attempt to radicalize and expand and become more militantly engaged on a ground, on a grassroots level with the struggle that I think is part of what gets suppressed in all of this. I think intentionally produced pop culture, media, and academic work. So, but anyway, in there, that's generally those are the areas I think that need most response in terms of what I think, what I see happening with Malcolm and his life and his ideas.
Diallo, any other misinformation that you think that you disabuse people from, or you would steer people away from misinformation?
Yeah. Also, it's kind of funny because I was thinking about the book, The Confessions of Nat Turner, where they said Nat Turner was a homosexual, in The Confessions of Nat Turner, and Dr. Clark edited a anthology speaking to that, and they said George Washington Carver, because he was castrated as a slave boy, they said that he was gay or had gender identity issues. There was a documentary called Look for Me in the Whirlwind that said Marcus Garvey started the UNIA because a white woman rejected his advances. And so the UNIA was basically him lashing out at the inability for black men to be with. So, they gonna do it. They gonna try it with everybody, So that, yeah. So I appreciate dealing with that and addressing that. But one of the things I think is Bimby, that Malcolm X was already on the path of enlightenment before he was indoctrinated into the cult of the Nation of Islam. He had a mentor. He spoke about him in the autobiography of Malcolm X. He's also mentioned in Malcolm X for Beginner by Bernard Doctor, where he was already on the path of discovering his African identity, understanding the nature of oppression and exploitation that led him on the wrong path, and engaging in liberation ideology and thus liberation work. So I don't think it's not necessarily a myth, but an omission in Malcolm X's evolution, that he was this savage Satan, just lashing out in prison. When a floating head of Elijah Muhammad appeared before him in a prison cell, like in the Malcolm X movie, there was a man and that Malcolm called Bimby that started his political education. His full name was John Elton Bembry. So that was, I think that him being omitted from much of the discussion surrounding Malcolm X's evolution and development, I just think is distorts the history and distorts the impact. Which learning about that is what led me to say, they did more to arrest his development than to advance it. So
Right.
just giving props to John Elton Brimley. If it wasn't for Bimby, that as Malcolm called him, I don't think we would have a Malcolm as we know him today.
Right. I would like for you to speak to again. So when you think about his always growing and expanding and evolving, and when you get to that point of when he was talking about the need for an objective analysis, and he started working with young people, colleges and universities, and I guess becoming more effective in his political struggle. And he talked about like getting political science students and having them study, and then help them bring some new understanding and analysis to the people. Like, can you kind of speak around that? I mean, I know you was a political science major, and I guess Jared work still kind of stands in the political science area. So could you speak a little bit about that?
Well, I like to speak, and I know this is a rough overview of it, but Malcolm went around the nation, the world, went around Jim Crow America for a decade, saying that the white man is the devil, and and telling black people to arm themselves and defend themselves against the Caucasus Mountain cave dwelling white devil that is the white man. That the white man was a grafted man with pig and dog and DNA. He went around the country saying some what would be called today inflammatory rhetoric, and he was able to relatively navigate unscathed and just move freely. When Malcolm began to become secular, number one, when he became secular, when he became Pan-Africanist and understood it was an internationalist struggle, when Malcolm stopped with the cultist rhetoric and started with the political analysis, that's when he truly became a threat. I think if you go around spewing empty, baseless rhetoric that is fueled by justified rage, that is the byproduct of systemic and ongoing oppression, and you take that justified rage and you become a reactionary and you start talking about devils and all type of mythological nonsense, as militant and as much guns and as much violent rhetoric as you have, it's obvious the system and institutions of white hegemony do not view you as a credible threat. But when you use that justified rage and use it to engage revolutionary analysis, critical analysis, and build and start working towards building secular institutions, that's when you become a real threat. When he went overseas, not just to bump his head on the floor in a mosque somewhere, but he went overseas to talk to internationalists, to anti-colonial revolutionaries, to armed guerrilla factions of the Black liberation struggle. That's when he became a credible threat. Before, he was just a inflammatory figure. So I wish that would inform us to this day. I really do. And one thing I admire about Malcolm that I've tried to emulate is the capacity for evolution. No matter how much truth you have, no matter how cozy you are in your political, ideological, or even physical home, to always be willing to cultivate and understand cultivate and expand your understanding, expand your analysis, always being engaged in internal critique. And even if that means you get expelled from these cozy spaces that you become accustomed to, ideological and physical spaces, still be willing to choose cultivation and correct analysis over anything that is not, that is stagnant, that is trying to restrict your development and cultivating your understanding, and making and taking more revolutionary action as opposed to reactionary or regressive actions and ideas.
Yeah, what was I actually lost what was the original question.
So pretty much like, you know, when you see his evolution, and you see how his political struggle increased, and then at a point he's like, I want to work with students and young people and people like political science, people studying our problems and then coming up with a more studied analysis to our problems. So just kind of speak to that.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, similar to what Diallo was saying. I mean, he was killed at 39, and I mean, I'm already 11 years older than he was at that time. I mean, so we have to. He was still learning. He was still meeting people. He was still being confronted by others, challenging him, and trying to figure out what was actually going to work. You know, I mean, and you know, what was going to win in his own lifetime. So, I mean, if uh, so it's not a surprise that I mean, definitely looking back, it's easy to see, but it's not a surprise that he was changing, and that he was looking to expand with whom he worked, and from whom he learned about what to do. While, you know, keeping all options on the table, any means necessary. I mean, you know, by the way, that's another thing. I cannot stand how often I see references to by any means necessary as a phrase. People say that all the time when you know damn well they don't mean any means. They mean they mean they mean by voting for the Democratic Party, by any you know, by any means voting for the leading Democrat. That's really what they mean. Or, you know, by any means getting that nonprofit grant. You know, like getting that grant means like that's what,
getting
anyway,
on CBS and Comedy Central.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they mean, you know. So anyway, sorry about that, but anyway, so yeah, I think anyway, that's how I understand what you're getting to, and understand that what he was doing. The more he traveled, the more he sat down, the more he studied and saw in real time what was happening. And even just look to the point where you had to start. Look at the again, the context of the world. I mean, he's seeing the neo-colonization of Africa, but at the time he's seeing what was supposed to be independence. He's seeing what's supposed to be a new stage, or at least a heightened stage of struggle, if not a step towards freedom. And he's seeing in real time what was working and what wasn't. He was seeing in real time the response of various leaders of various revolutions around the world to his efforts, and was learning. So I mean, again, from what I understand from Diallo's point, I mean, this is a problem that I have with where people are today in their reference to people like Malcolm, in terms of putting a sort of a political cap on that his individual and our collective political evolutionary process, by saying, as some pop scholars and other pundits have done, that the election of Obama, the election of black candidates, the presence of black celebrity, and a relative uptick of not of black wealth, but of black wealth being skewed so with such levels of inequality as to produce a handful of black billionaires. The assumption is, Malcolm's cap has been, reached, and his cap was more or less endless. I mean, I think of Malcolm's political cap the way Charles Finch describes the universe. It's like a box with no sides and no top and no bottom. I mean, it's infinite. And I keep seeing people put these very narrow and reactionary boxes on him, and on us by extension.
Right. So I wonder, you first, Jared, in terms of the movie, right? So the Spike Lee movie, there are groups, organized groups right now, probably showing the movie to people and they're teaching people about Malcolm. And so my question is, how do you think Malcolm X movie impacted us? Or what do you think it did to our political attitudes or our understanding of his politics? So how was this movie impactful, you think?
So I know, part of the political calculation that I make to when I conclude that things are worse today than they were in his time is not to make to be hyperbolic or to be unfair to people living then, but it's to say that even as the material conditions have made, I think, more surface level or nominal shifts than anything else. But the key difference for me is, at least includes the media environment of today that did not exist then. And what we're confronting today is far worse and far more complicated than what was being dealt with in Malcolm's own lifetime. And so I've always felt myself teaching and working against the film and the damage the film has done and continues to do. Because unlike the claims of people who disagree with me on this point, films like that don't encourage a greater understanding of the supposed subject. They cloud an understanding of the supposed subject. Either they create the illusion that people understand the subject and have done sufficient work, particularly if it's presented as a documentary, but even as a film. And but even if there is the rare follow-up, which I think often does not occur by individuals who see films like this, their interpretation of what they follow up with is clouded by the film. And again, a couple of years ago, I went back and checked this, and it takes about 90 minutes of the film, of Spike Lee's film, before you see Malcolm as Malcolm. And then by the time you blink, he's assassinated and the movie's over and the credits are rolling. You get more of his international politics in Mario Van Peebles' rendition of him in Will Smith's Ali film than you do in all of Spike Lee's film. And I'm saying that's wildly insufficient and unfair too. But I'm just saying, in terms of pop movies, you get more of Malcolm's internationalism in the one or two scenes in Ali than you do in that whole thing from Spike Lee. I don't think almost anything is mentioned of his internationalism in Spike Lee's film. And then, of course, Spike Lee's film is not Spike Lee's film. It's a Warner Brothers product, who at the time was saying very clearly they wanted to market Malcolm and brand him to make him Simpsons and Batman. So that's what that product is. It's the Simpsons and Batman in terms of its relevance and impact to Malcolm's life and to the political struggle still, I think, relevant today. So yeah, I'll stop there. Those are my some thoughts.
And so same thing, Diallo, the impact of the movie, and Jared, if you need to circle back, you can circle back for this as well. Impact of the Spike Lee movie. But is there any movies, documentaries out there that you think could be useful? Maybe like I think the Miami trip, and Godfather of Harlem. I know I know a lot of them are problematic, but okay, speak first to the Malcolm X movie, and then if you want to add about any other films and stuff out there, go ahead, Diallo.
Well, it's funny because when I was in high school and I had just been applying and going to see starting college is when the movie came out. And it was one of the only movies I've ever stood in like a 4 or 5 hour line. I saw it in Brooklyn, New York when it premiered in Spike Lee's joint. I had my X cap that I had got from 40 Acres and the Mules down over in Fulton, Brooklyn. I had my X cap and my X medallion to see that movie. And I walked out, bewildered. If I hadn't paid $19 for that X cap, I would have threw it away. But $19 was a lot of money to a freshman in college in '92. So anyway, I was shocked. My jaw literally dropped, and there was an intermission. And when we because these were really conscious young people. It was a whole media spectacle. It was my first time ever being a part of something like that on that scale, and behind the velvet rope and being so. Anyway, during the intermission, you could walk out into the common area of the theater, and no one was speaking. And I don't know if people were in awe or just in shock or traumatized, And when people went back in, I mean, a third of the seats were empty. Like people just didn't go back in. So early on, people that was literally the premiere for the people. I know they probably had like a Hollywood type premiere, but that was the Brooklyn premiere, the first showing of X in Brooklyn. And I just really couldn't believe, having read his biography and admired Malcolm, but I don't know, I probably shouldn't have been shocked, but I wasn't too familiar. The only movie I had seen prior to that was Do the Right Thing. I wasn't familiar with the spectacle that they made of Malcolm. So yeah, it doesn't speak to who Malcolm was. It's not a good homage. It's not a very good biography. In fact, I haven't watched any fictional reproductions of Malcolm's life, and since then, I haven't watched any of the other known Malcolm X movies, or the Malcolm and Ali and Sam Cooke or whatever movie. That's my first and only fictional or biographical cinematic portrayal of Malcolm X that I've ever sat through. I don't really have anything good to say about it. What stands out the most to me about it is that floating head of Elijah Muhammad in the prison cell. That's what I always think of. I think people really believe that's literal, because it's a nonfiction biographical movie, and that people really think that floating head of Elijah Muhammad thing happened. So that's pretty much sums up the movie to me. Del Jones said about the movie that Spike Lee basically, and today is Del Jones, Nana Kuntu, the war correspondent's birthday as well. So happy birthday to brother Del Jones. But he said that our generation resurrected Malcolm, that his generation that was prior to ours, they kind of let Malcolm fall by the wayside. And our generation resurrected Malcolm. And then Spike Lee took advantage of that resurrection for his own ends. And now he a lot of times gets credit for bringing Malcolm back to the popular consciousness and the cultural consciousness of the United States. And so that's another inaccuracy. Spike Lee was taking advantage of the youth rediscovering Malcolm. I had been hearing Malcolm, Poor Righteous Teacher, have a whole, on their first album. It came out years before the X movie. Word from the Wise.
BDP too.
Is basically him rapping. I'm sorry.
I was just jumping in and say the BDP cover too. KRS-One did that whole album cover with the gun and all of that.
Public Enemy, Too Black, Too Strong, Too Black, Too Strong. So the Spike Lee does not deserve credit for resurrecting Malcolm or bringing Malcolm back to popular consciousness. That was progressive hip hop and the activists of the early 90s and late 80s. He just took advantage and got out in front of a wave and took credit for something he actually damaged or harmed, let alone did not create. So, but I haven't seen any. I think the Make It Plain documentary on Malcolm is probably the best, because it is literally nothing but reel after reel of Malcolm's own words, audio and video recordings of Malcolm's that are well edited together, not taken out of context. I think that's probably, if you want to see a cinematic experience, or if you want to hold some type of event, you could play that, or just play his speeches. I mean, his audio and video recordings are numerous, and they're easily available. I have a whole catalog of Malcolm's writings, his audio and video recordings. Just play Malcolm. You don't need any Hollywood, pizzazz. He's one of the most dynamic speakers ever. So I would suggest that people do that and just let that movie go into what Dr. Clark called the ash can of history. And even Denzel, he was shown a clip about 4 years ago, he was shown a clip. Denzel says, I haven't watched that movie. I saw that movie after it came out. He's like, even Denzel has distanced himself from the movie. Maybe for different reasons. Maybe he don't want Jesus to punish him for playing a heathen Muslim. I don't know, because Denzel's a religious Christian nationalist fanatic. But, even Denzel has scooched away from that movie. So I suggest
he doesn't want to tarnish the memory of his Training Day Oscar.
Yeah, hey,
that classic performance in Training Day.
I think Training Day is a better movie than Malcolm. If you're gonna mess up,
it probably is. I'm just
listen. So I was in a group the other day, and they was asking, "What's your top 3 favorite Denzel movies?" And I don't have any of them, but I said I don't like none of the movies, but John Q, would probably been okay because that's
his most revolutionary film.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm rocking with. Like, you don't got health care and these people doing whatever, you're going to knock the place up. And then Be Cool was like, I don't know.
I hated that, though. I hated that movie, too. Like, that's my thing. So Denzel has portrayed 2 of my favorite people in 2 horrible films. And the Biko film is more easy to destroy, number one, because it doesn't hold the same place in people's imagination that Malcolm's film does, but also because it's based on Donald Woods's White book. So which I also read, which is
trash.
Well, it's not trash. I wouldn't call his book trash, only because it's his version of him being a hero in the apartheid struggle. So I mean, if the white man is going to tell his own story and be heroic in basically saving black, that's at least how I remember the book. I don't know. I can't vouch for the accuracy. But my point is, the film does the same thing. Biko is basically, locked up, tortured, and becomes a background player to what's his name, the famous actor that played Donald Woods in the movie. And then the rest of the movie is about Donald Woods and his family escaping the authorities, basically. So I mean, that anyway, so in general, we should not be looking to movie. I think Diallo's approach is exactly, I mean, that's my Vernon philosophy of black media avoidance. We should avoid it. Especially if the goal is to look for ourselves in the product. We should avoid it. So the Sugar Booger's question, my thing is, again, like what Diallo was saying, the autobiography is fine, but that has to be looked at critically as well. And then, but look at his speeches, look at his, read his speeches, listen to his work. And then, I do, in terms of the politics, I think, Peter Goldman's book is good. Zach Kondo's book is good. Bill Sales' book about the OAAU is, I think, very important. That's the literature I've more or less leaned on off the top of my head. John Henrik Clarke's commemorations are good. But Malcolm himself is the best. I mean, it's just so clear. I mean, it's just the Make It Plain documentary is excellent as well. So, and there's a book companion to that too. So, I mean, that's it.
Right.
That's
it. Yeah. So there's there's still this concept of like, we need to separate and we need to build our own nation. And I remember Amos Wilson one time saying, like, you want to act like a white man talking white. It's not acting like a white man. We want to act like a white man, be like Elijah Muhammad or Farrakhan, and create your own nation. So there been a point of Malcolm's life where he talked about building this independent nation or black states in the U.S. And obviously there's things been involving in his life, but in terms of what you learned from him and what you know about our conditions, how do you feel about this concept of an independent nation within a nation or independent black states in the U.S.?
Me, I don't look, on some level, I see the value of having that as some sort of goal to a certain extent, because I do think it can help situate a person or a community in the right political direction. But ultimately, I don't see it as viable. I don't see it as a worthy tactic, and I don't see this. a goal of, first of all, I don't see Malcolm advocating that goal, particularly towards the end of his life. I don't recall him being that specific in any of his political conclusions. I don't know if they had even been fully formed. You could even argue that by the time he's assassinated, he's in such a flux at that point. But when I think of that as an option, ultimately what I end up thinking of, the best we would end up with is an internally colonized nation that did not control much beyond its limited borders. I can't even imagine what it would have to look like for that nation in this hemisphere to even have a port. In one of the fantasy plays or films that I was actually hoping to create with a comrade, it was about what happens after the spook who sat by the door? Like, what happened if that happened in Baltimore and was relatively successful, and Baltimore had been taken over in the surrounding area, giving Baltimore control of the port, a Black revolutionary stronghold, and just in trying to figure out, even in terms of a semi, Afro-futuristic surrealist film, it was hard to come up with the reality in terms of how this would look. Like, what would all have had to have occurred for this to happen and to be sustainable? The level of conflict and the level of military victory would have to be enormous for us to even get to that point. But the idea of being given space or territory or land, the best we would hope for are what the indigenous have in their reservations. I don't see that as being either granted or a legitimate goal. And ultimately, I don't see any levels of sufficient organization in Black spaces to get enough on the same page to get that far. For every group calling for even just for reparations, you got a Herschel Walker getting dragged out talking about, we don't need nothing, boss, we good. So I'm just saying, like, anyway, so if ultimately on some level I'm fine with a lot of grand even fantasy dreaming, that quote that I often butcher from Fanon about the goal of the colonizers to destroy the freedom dreams of the colonized. It has been largely successful. So I don't mind dreaming big, but I think that we'd have to get, much more organized and much more militant in whatever it is we want, whether it be, just concessions from the Democratic Party or reparations or an internal nation, or even an independent external nation. All of it would require levels of organization I don't see at this point. So anyway.
Okay. So how about you, Diallo? I know at points of his life he talked about a short-term goal is, have a state here, then long-term goal, go back to Africa. Like, how do you feel about the situation and also what you took from his life?
Yeah, I think Dr. Ball, pretty much summed it up. And if the Nation of Islam started to make strides towards securing territory in the United States of its own, I'd probably be the Herschel Walker. Y'all have to kick me off the mix show. Let me tell y'all something about that damn nation, boss. So I'd probably Herschel Walker that shit. First of all, the nation wants to establish a theocracy. And the only thing that I can imagine being worse than a freaking neoliberal pseudo democracy is a goddamn theocracy. So no to that. No to trying to establish a theocracy. Look at all the surrounding nations under the neighboring nations of the U.S. Empire, even Canada, the Caribbean states, Central America, Panama, and even Mexico. They're all client states to the empire that have extremely limited sovereignty and suffer constant impositions by the United economic and even military invasions from the United States. It's a silly goal that only a person who is either short-sighted or a person who is trying to manipulate the desires of millions of Black people for their own desires. It is not realistic. Even Dr. Clark said, if you can't operate a candy store in Harlem, don't pretend like you can run a African economy or independent economy. It is unrealistic. It is a waste of our time, effort, and resources. It's just one step above selling Black folks a heaven and a hereafter. We don't need our own independent territory within the confines of the United States, while the U.S. federal government and the U.S. military is still entrenched and still fully functioning. Like it is absolutely nonsensical. And even if we were to build an independent state, we cannot rely on organizations like the Nation of Islam to set up a Islamic theocracy, which would be even more nightmarish than what a lot of the governing systems that African people live under across the globe to this day. No.
So Hiram's asking if you'd be good with the churches, though.
Hey, wait. I don't think Hiram knows Diallo. I think he heard some stuff about the Islam, and he heard.
Yeah, I don't think he caught the whole thing. Yeah.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Hey, Hiram gets some room in my book. He gets some room to miss a couple things in my book. What's up, Hiram?
Yeah, that's my aim, to get people, these Mohammedans are taking us away from Jesus' blessings. That's my whole gig. He figured me out. I'm about to log off.
So I don't know if
and one more thing. Can I say one more thing? If you study any type of guerrilla warfare, whether from the perspective of the standing army, the U.S. Pentagon has produced some of the best works on guerrilla warfare in their attempts to counter guerrilla warfare. But if you read anybody from Che to Nkrumah to Mao, guerrillas do not seek to hold territory. That's the one thing that guerrillas do not do. In guerrilla warfare, when you're facing an overwhelming force, an entrenched, established, legal, overwhelming force, the last thing you are trying to do is to identify and hold territory. The one of the greatest advantages of being a guerrilla force, and whether it's guerrilla military action or even guerrilla politics, is your maneuverable ability. What makes the forces that the guerrillas are fighting against so vulnerable is the fact that they have established, entrenched forces and territory. So anybody that's talking about revolutionary warfare or any type of revolutionary radical action, at the same time they're talking about establishing a border or establishing a known base or nation, they are highly confused about what stage of the struggle they are in, or what stage of political development that the larger community is in, and they're creating more potential for harm for us than they are for any potential for freedom and liberation. If you really go study guerrilla warfare, there's way too many good works. War of the Flea, there's way too many good works. So, anybody that's talking about, and I tell the nation, go set up Salam, go give back the millions of dollars you raised for Salam restaurant. You can't even run a restaurant. You still hustling bean pies on the street corner. You ain't built a decent restaurant yet. So don't talk about managing land and territory.
So tell me, what do y'all think about, so New Africa, and even after Malcolm leaves NOI, and any thoughts around that? If there's still an idea to build a state in Africa or New Africa, like what are y'all thoughts around that?
I'm sorry.
Can you hear?
I'm not.
So again, if his idea of nation adjusted from NOI, people are asking about this concept of like New Africa, and was Malcolm a chairman of the provisional government of the Republic of New Africa? Any thoughts about that, or understanding about that?
That's definitely not my expertise, but I don't remember him. What I was remembering was that it was that the RNA was formed by former members of Malcolm's OAAU, but that anything would have been an honorific after his life, after his assassination. But my memory is not good on that, and some of the chronology I get fuzzy on. So I'm happy to be checked on that. And what was the other part of the question?
Just, I mean, if what he did with OAAU, do like him kind of pivoting politically, I guess how does that relate to building a nation state in Africa, or building something in Africa, not even building something here? Obviously, we know Kwame and Nkrumah kind of asked him to stay. He should stay or whatever. So
Yeah, I mean, again, the way I at least interpret what Malcolm was advocating is somewhere along the lines of even that argument that Huey Newton would eventually evolve around. Why, there are no nations at this point to which we can decolonize. There has to be some sort of internationalist or intercommunal development here. So that's sort of how I saw the trajectory I saw Malcolm moving in, and that was his point about developing the OAAU here, in his hope to link that up with a radical OAU. Am I missing? My bad. I don't know. Anyway, let me just finish that thought. Then I'll come back to the comments. I'm trying not to lose my train of thought. And anyway, and that the point was that Malcolm's nationalism was always described as wherever we are, we should be in control of our politics, economics, and social lives. So if that would require a global revolution, or at least global solidarity in defense of revolutions in different areas of the world. So I don't see. So that's how I interpret. So I don't see, and that's why I think it's always a struggle, similar to what he was, because remember, he was also inspired by the work of Che and Fidel, who had their own arguments about the expansion of the revolution there. I mean, that was part of the split between Che and Fidel. And I think that's what Malcolm was seeing in terms of his split with Elijah, that on some level that the struggle, we can't just put our own nation together and expect that to survive and be protected and safe. We have to be linked up. The revolution has to be expanded if anybody's going to be defended anywhere. So anyway,
okay, yeah, that's cool. So in the chats, if you have any questions, we probably got a few more questions, and then we're going to start to wrap up. But if you have any questions, I want to leave a space for you to ask any follow-up questions, or questions that didn't get asked that you want to ask, and then we can chew on those. But Diallo, did you want to respond to the New Africa thing?
Yeah, I guess I did. We still got the old Africa, so I don't know what the point of a new Africa is when we still got the OG Africa. So like I said, I think it's been a great rally cry, but I just try to be practical and grounded at the same as practical as I am radical. And what such an objective would be. What is the potential for success? What will be the liabilities and the ultimate potential benefits to whatever action. I really value conscious Black people. I value radical Black people. I value Black people who are willing to put in the effort to make a positive contribution to the just aspirations of African people. Therefore, I don't like to waste their time. I don't like to give them the inappropriate or improper priorities or focus. So, I know it may seem harsh or unpleasant, but if we're going to engage with our people who are willing to engage with the work of freedom and liberation, I think we owe them, at the very least, the truth and an honest assessment, an honest prognosis, a diagnosis of the condition and a prognosis of any type of treatment or any type of political action. What is the potential for success, and what is the outcome of that success? Because even if you succeed at an objective, what will be the outcome? Where do you go from there? So I agree with Dr. Ball. This is a planetary problem, and there is no regionalized or localized solution. And I am all for aesthetics. I am all for slogans and rhetoric. I love revolutionary propaganda, but free the land and land is freedom and all that. You have to, after the slogan, after you rally people and inspire people to fight, you have to come up with viable agendas. for our people, and getting our own Disneyland. You see, even the most powerful corporation in the world, Disney, just got its land snatched by the governor of Florida, and so like it's just, you need institutional power, and as much as we need to build our own power, we have to set up a way to subvert. We have to subvert institutional white power. We have to undermine capitalism and global white hegemony, not just have our own place on the planet. There is no sanctuary from nuclear fallout, global warming, ocean acidification, dioxin and mercury contamination. Even if we had our own borders and our own flag, even if we had all of that, we still would have to re-engage with the larger struggle. This is not about escaping to any place, but really confronting the existential threat, which is global white domination, capitalism, and white hegemony across the globe.
So Ricky asks, are you in the organization? And I would wonder if how do you or we feel about organizations, their effectiveness? And then, so again, Malcolm within organization was able to look at the contradictions and stand up or protect women and children in there with the whole Elijah Muhammad situation. So I guess answer the question, are you affiliated or in organization? And then what do you see in terms of organization as in our effectiveness to respond to our conditions? Especially I guess looking at Malcolm's life.
Oh, well, yes, I am in the African World Coalition, that was formerly the Chicago Agenda, which was formerly the Black Oppression Opposition Movement. Yes, organization and institutions are essential and a cornerstone. I think all of our work should be filtered through an organization that has an articulated ideology and that it has a articulated agenda platform, even as it evolves. I also think that our organizations must be, without compromise, secular organizations, that the hierarchies must be fluid, that the ideology is what leads us, not any individual, that we make sure that we set up to prevent the rise of establishment of demagogues or leaders for life. But I even talk quite a bit about how organizations often devolve into cults, and how to counter and how to establish organizations with that measure. I was doing a lot of public grassroots activism earlier, but a lot of failures and losses has driven me to rethink my own personal approach and my larger organizational approach. But yes, I would say every African person, as Kwame Ture said, should be a member of an organization. If there is no organizations that suits your constitution, then you should build one. So I am a long-term member. The organization I've worked with longest publicly was the National Black United Front, Kansas City chapter. But I've always, since my beginning of my organizational life, have worked within, or at least try to build organizations. If you are seeking to make change, a fundamental change for African people, you must do it through an organization or established institution that is secular and, of course, radical and revolutionary.
Absolutely. Jared, if you have any thoughts about that question in terms of organization, and then I don't know if this is Ricky's first question. Somebody said answers Ricky's first question. I don't know if this is one, but make sure if you have a question, get it in so I can put it up. But yeah, the question of organization, and then maybe this one.
Well, this question I think is also directed at Diallo too, if I'm reading the context correctly. But in general, to this one, I don't, in terms of like a Republic of New Africa versus the old Africa. As I understood it, again, the positives are trying to if I remember correctly, also try to the goal is to try to reassociate Black people with a connection to Africa and as African people themselves, and then to make an argument about if at least a group of us are committed to not returning to the continent, that efforts be made here to carve out and create relative political independent space. and certainly I don't have I understood what Malcolm was trying to do with the OAAU as being the North American, I guess, or Western hemispheric extension of the OAU. Again, of course, he was assuming that the OAU was going to become something other than what it became, and was trying to build a complementary organization to it on this side. So I fully agree with all of that. In terms of political organization, I'm very self-critical, and I'd like to be as public and honest about that as I can whenever the issue comes up. So, I mean, officially, I am a member of Black Alliance for Peace, Pan-African Community Action, Community Movement Builders, the All African People's Revolutionary Party, but largely my engagement is virtual for collective study, and isn't. And in terms of my contribution and engagement, isn't anything what I would have wanted it to be or had expected it to be at this point in my life, and isn't doing what I would have wanted us to be doing. And the reasons for that I think are beyond this conversation. Some of it is even personal, maybe not appropriate for public discussion. But the point is that what I will say is a sort of a segue out of this question or response is that when I was more engaged with my, going back a couple of decades now with Black Voices for Peace under the late Damu Smith, and then Organized Community of United People, which was my favorite personal one. And then ultimately with also the Malcolm X grassroots movement. What I was advocating, and I still think is appropriate, and I hope is happening, and I'm just not aware of it, was that I still think we need more off the record work than on the record work. And I still think we need more attention to be paid to building organization than presenting work that the organization is doing. And this idea was never well received. I admit that. It was never fully developed, and I never was around long enough to fully try to implement it. But my point really was, and still is, that too much from what I see of the work is an attempt to capture others, almost in terms of like social media and email list building, as opposed to any meaningful, sustainable, radical organization that would have an impact and create the kind of conditions for change that I think still needs to occur. But all that said, I mean, again, I want to be clear that this is a self-critique that I'm sharing, that I think is somewhat relevant to that question. So, but I'll stop there.
Right. So there's a time that Malcolm said that we can't organize sleeping people around specific goals. You have to wake them up first, then you'll get action. And I want to respond to that, but also this person's question. Have any of y'all read Special Field Order number 15? Do you know the practical and immediate provisions for reparations and Black-led nation was already in progress in 1865? Start there.
Well, I wanted to speak to the OAAU and the OAU. When I said New Africa, that was tongue in cheek. I think that's a really cool name. The Republic of New Africa is a wonderful name, even though the objective and agenda I have issue with. So I don't mind African people adopting New Africa concepts. I understand, I comprehend. It doesn't negate the old Africa. That was a bit tongue in cheek, but everything I said. But I do think that there are specific roles for the African diaspora to play than the continental Africans play. So, I am in constant communication with movements in West Africa that I really don't like to speak of, because there's a lot of frontline work going on there that I don't want to compromise, because I am so vocal in public. So I also do quite a bit of work that, I don't really publicize. But to say that, yeah, we are New Africans, African diaspora. I'm cool with that. I don't have any issue with that, identifying as New Africans or whatever. But yeah, there is understanding that we have to design in the African diaspora, design agendas and organizations that are complementary and mutually supportive to what's happening in the continent. They can't be exact replicas because of the conditions of neocolonialism versus being, subjects living within the belly of the beast of the empire nation. So is to say that as far as field order number 19, I know most repatriation efforts that were supported by the government were a catastrophe when the Africans, the African colonial organizations that sent a number of former slaves back to Africa, Liberia, it was laced with atrocity, and the Africans went back with much of the dysfunction that and unaddressed trauma and internalized whiteness and internalized anti-African concepts. So if you look at the history of Liberia, to me, our problem is not geography. It is not where we are. It's Rakim. It's not where you are. It's where you at. I think conscious Africans can make a positive contribution wherever we are. I have no issues with Africans as individuals or as a group attempting to repatriate. I have no issue. I'm fully in solidarity with that. I've seen several successful Africans, but I think my only thing is that if you are returning to the African continent, it must be to join and contribute to the struggles ongoing there, not as an escape from the struggles here. So if you go into Africa as to find a new platform to struggle and build, as opposed to escape the challenges here, I have no problems with Black folks throwing down their stake here and engaging in the struggle here. This, like I said, this is a non-discriminant planetary system of oppression. So wherever you are, you can engage with the struggle.
But just to be clear, the Special Field Order 15 was Sherman's land grant to so-called ex-slaves, the 40 acres and a mule claim. So as the question was asking, do you have provisions for reparation? Do you know any practical and immediate provisions for reparations? A Black-led nation was already in progress. So this is sort of my problem with reparations as a claim, and with this piece of history and how it's remembered and brought back often by Spike Lee types, etc., into the popular consciousness, is that and the simple point is that without political power, all of it is meaningless. So the field order was, and I don't remember the specifics of the history, but the field order from Sherman is called for, I think, was the January of 1865, and then that's it. It can't be implemented, it can't be protected, it's overturned. I want to say, no, I can't remember, but it's almost immediately, overturned as a policy, and it's never upheld. And ultimately, it would have been insufficient in handling the needs of the entire Black population at the time, let alone now. I think it was only, I don't know, several 100,000 acres on the East Coast. I mean, it was not gonna, and then without, again, political power, it would have been at best an internally held colony, which is what I'm arguing we are anyway. So to Diallo's point, and I used to quote Jack Odell on this. It's not an issue of geography; it's about relationship, and that's why I've argued that Black people are an internal colony now, because it's not. It doesn't matter where the population is housed necessarily. That's only part of it. It's the broader economic and social political relationship that is the issue. Anyway, so that would be my and I think this is what Malcolm was coming. This is what he was attempting to confront, and why he understood that there would be a cap put on the freedom, the aspirations of Black people here, if people around if the rest of the diaspora is colonized, if the imperialist powers are not dealt with, and so on and so forth. So, and yeah.
I'm not sure that this person has their history, I guess, in line, because when you talked about the field order, you're talking about the same thing, but they're saying it's some kind of different. I'm not sure.
Field. I just did a quick looked it up again. I mean, General William T. Sherman, Special Field Order 15, and then you can read the whole thing. It's not that long, and it just basically says the islands from Charleston south, the abandoned rice fields along the rivers for 30 miles back from the sea, and the country bordering the St. Johns River, Florida, are reserved and set apart for the settlement of the Negroes, now made free by the acts of war, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
And then that was it.
Yeah. So, by the way, like I said before, we're wrapping up right now, but I do have way for someone to come on. So if Afra sings, if you want to come on, we can come on. You can ask your question directly. That way it don't get lost in translation. But before we wrap up, when I wrap up, I want to wrap up with 3 questions or 3 finishing statements. But before that, I got this one more question. In terms of like worker solidarity between the black working class and the white working class, there was a point where Malcolm thought it was possible, impossible. How do you guys feel about solidarity between working class white folks, especially here in America? Like, you think it's necessary, possible, or?
Gosh, man. In terms of when you say worker solidarity, it is possible, and we have evidence of it. But when you have a group where, I think Kwame Ture said it best, where there's a difference between being exploited and oppressed. African people are oppressed, white people are exploited. And so he said, if you are exploited, then you can reform the system in order to loosen or reduce your exploitation, or even in your exploitation. You do not have to subvert the institutions. You do not have to transform the culture. So, but he said, when you are oppressed, in order to end oppression, you have to subvert institutions. You have to change the fundamental relationships within it. So there's a problem when oppressed populations unite with exploited populations, because what inevitably happens is the exploited populations will reach a state of contentment. And so they were like, okay, we got what we wanted. Now it's time to stop. So when you have a group that is suffering from labor exploitation and a group that is suffering from racial, cultural, historical, gender-based, and all those other exploitations. And so there's an old adage that's saying you don't enter into a scheme with someone who has less at stake than you do, because they're going to throw in the towel long before you get what you want. So when it comes to Amazon labor union, I think that's great. You know, if you were an Amazon worker, if I was an Amazon worker and I'm locking arms in order to get an extra, longer breaks, safer working conditions, and other labor things, you can lock arms with a white dude. They're unionizing Starbucks across the country. Same thing. My wife was a Chicago public school teacher for many years, and I mean, I can't count how many times we still got the protest signs before she left Chicago public schools, and we'd head downtown and it'd be all the white folks, and we'd be down there marching with the mob. And I always ask my wife, where are we marching to? And she would say, the mob knows what it's doing, just move with the mass. I stop asking questions. And so me and my sons, and we'd be down there holding up signs for the teachers union. But that's not liberation. The full objectives of the Amazon labor union, of the teachers union, their objectives could be met 100%. They could get everything they want at the labor negotiating table, and it will not in any way put a dent in our oppression, the genocidal oppression that we're under. So yeah, when it comes to work, and if you can lobby or get better benefits, that's great. Worker solidarity. But we are not simply workers. We do not start or stop as a worker. And that's where, class analysis and class starts to kind of break down. We are oppressed people. We are not simply exploited for our labor. We are oppressed as a race. So I don't say, don't lobby for better benefits at your job in place of appointment. Go for that. But do not think, because I was a member of the 1199 union for many years, and at the same time I'd go to the 1199 lobbying for a healthcare workers union when I was a radiographer. Right after that, I have to go to the streets and fight against, this is right around the time of Amadou Diallo, Agner Louima. I'm in the streets fighting against police atrocities. and state-sanctioned murder of African people. And I understood the difference between those two struggles. And the white folks I was fighting for, better working conditions, and we had to fight and protest just to get those non-toxic. They had the latex gloves that were really toxic, and people were getting rations and say we need the non-latex gloves for the workers. But I didn't ask those labor workers to come join me in the black struggles, because they just would be subversive and disruptive. So I think we can walk and chew gun at the same time, and we understand the necessity of both, and we understand the divergence between the both. And at the moment that those teams become hostile, which they have several times in history, where organized labor was hostile to black interest, choose black power. Because like I said, I had a union. My wife comes from a strong Chicago union family, and there was a time where the union was threatening civil rights workers, saying, you over there, you got a good job, you got it good over here, why are you out there in the streets acting a fool? And so whenever that inevitable time when the white working class starts to represent white interest over labor's interest, we got to represent African interest over organized labor.
So the only thing I would add to that is that the only way we see that need and the clarity of where our interests do and do not merge is to be first organized. And this is what I always take away from Malcolm, is that Black people have to be organized collectively before engaging in any endeavor with any other group. And then, of course, that effort has to be internationalized throughout the African diaspora to make the local efforts more meaningful and powerful. So I think that's what Malcolm, does, makes pretty clear for us to build from in his own experience and what he in analysis. So,
yeah, and like he said, there are no permanent allies, only permanent interests.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up with these final three questions and wait for Afra Sings to come on. So I want you to answer these in elevator pitch style, short, sweet, to the point. But the first one is, how would you, what's your thoughts on the evolution and evolution and elevation of Malcolm X's life? Like, if you had to say it in a short, condensed manner, what would you say your thoughts are on his evolution? Both of y'all.
To me, he's as good an example as any of what the transformation that any of us can make.
No. I agree with that. I would also say that, I'll just restate that, always continue to be self-critical and continue to be willing to evolve. When greater information is presented, act on that better and information, as opposed to being dogmatic and resting on old or invalidated information or beliefs. Cults don't.
Sophia Bukhari, baby. Any revolutionary has to be willing to submit themselves to the rapier knife of revolutionary criticism. But yeah, buddy.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's good. Good. This one might be a little bit longer, but your reflection on his life and legacy and how it impact you personally.
For me, I feel like it's a pretty stereotypical transformation for certainly Black men of my generation. I read when I was in the military, when I heard that Spike's movie was going to come out, and I knew that could not be sort of the grand introduction. I had certainly not read Malcolm at that point, and took to reading him. And as soon as I read not only the autobiography, but all the literature I could get at the time, I thought I knew everything that I needed to know. And in some ways, I think that is true, and that everything else I've learned has just been elaborating and expanding upon the basics that I got from Malcolm. That's.
Yeah. I think being his absolute fearlessness is one of the things. People jump on me about me saying out of pocket inappropriate things, and I figured the only way that you're going to stop me from articulating the truth is by demonstrating to me that what I'm saying is not true or not accurate. And just Malcolm's fearlessness in the face of firebombing. And another thing, but I maybe that'll come opportunity to speak to that later, because there's another great travesty of Malcolm X that I think goes unaddressed. But yeah, Malcolm X commitment to our liberation and his fearlessness in pursuing it is what inspired me.
Okay. All right. And then the last one, I don't know if Africans, I don't know if that's a sister or brother or what, but wait for them to come on. The lessons that you would advise people to take forward, the applicable lessons from then to now. And I know some of it kind of got translated in there, but the lessons that you would want people, or you would recommend people take forward with Malcolm's life and legacy.
Study, join organizations, and be willing to challenge and confront self-concept and analysis. And then I'm very George Jackson on the critique of Malcolm as well. Never leave security. Never tell security to leave. Never go unsecured or without security. I do agree with that criticism of Malcolm from George Jackson. He should have never told the guns to stand down. But that said, so that I do, security, study, self-criticism, evolution, ever towards more militancy.
I would say the lesson, that's what I was actually going to say, in terms of being secure, especially when you reach certain levels of notoriety, it is essential. I would also say never join a cult. If you are currently in a cult, exit the cult. If an organization that you were a part of starts to devolve into a cult or a cult of personality, and you're unable to thwart that dissension, then exit without apology, without explanation. Do not engage our struggle through cults. Cults are only there to exploit you as the individual, not to uplift us as a people. I think that is the top lesson outside of to on the other side of what Dr. Ball said, which I absolutely agree with.
And please call me Jared. You keep saying Dr. Ball. Come on, man. We've been doing a show together now, which will be tomorrow morning, by the way.
Yeah, I was raised by woman that taught me proper manners, and you want me to?
But am I even older than you? I'm saying, like, are we? How much older?
Wait. Let the audience guess. Who's old? Let the audience guess who's older from looks. Both of them.
Yeah,
both of them vegan. Both of them vegan, I think, right now. Both of them have the LeBron
Teal
James.
Said I'm older.
Oh dang! Teal said Ball.
I appreciate you, KD. No, but again, I'm with KD on this. I only want my degree acknowledged to the extent because I'm still paying for it. That's really the only reason I wanted to acknowledge. But so everybody's saying I'm older.
Dang.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh wait, no. KD said Diallo's older. So there's one vote for Diallo. Everybody else is saying I'm older.
Damn. So what's the age reveal?
I'm 48.
So they're right. I'm 50.
Oh.
I'll be there soon.
I hope so.
They should,
and more than that.
They said you should never ask a woman her age, so we're not gonna ask you your age. But you could definitely come. You could definitely come on and clarify some of the questions or your questions, and we can build around it. How you doing?
I'm doing okay, and that's a very, very wise action to take. Not ask my age. Thank you. And so I, you know what? So I'm friends with Kim. So we're, we always do some sort of a wrap up after her show on Instagram. And I'm a bit counter to the, to some of the extra, like the extra leftness, but I'm still there with y'all. I was just getting frustrated because I think we spend a lot of time talking about what Black people can't do, what we can't do. And there were a couple of things that y'all mentioned about, faith leaders not being in charge of the movement and things like that. And I was just like, we have a lot of our people do not know that we have an actual real starting point example of this is how you start the process of reparations. This is how you start building power nation, building and all these things right here in the U.S. Not the Liberia out of back to Africa movement, but like right here. And it's something that's completely lost and doesn't, we don't know about. And talking about the U.S. rescinding laws and things like that. Right now, women are here subject to rescinding things, like Roe v. Wade. There are a lot of other things that we've seen in the law, come and go. When it comes to Black people actually getting some sort of compensation and starting over as a process of self-reliance and determination. When we start talking about that only lasted a couple months. Roe v. Wade lasted a few decades before they tried to rescind it, before they're doing what they're doing right now to rescind it. So I'm just saying that we don't know about that. It's purposely hidden away. Anytime they're talking about reparations, no one actually talks about the fact that the process started already and it was immediately shut down. They killed a president, not because he freed us, but because he started giving reparations, and they shut it down. And what we know as the Homestead Act is built on what was meant to be reparations for Black people and people that are still living in a lot of these lands, that are still, a lot of these towns that are in the U.S. A lot of them were built from the Homestead Act, which Jackson enacted after rescinding the reparations that Lincoln started. And most of the people that were granted land through Homestead Act and still are receiving benefits from that were white people, mainly white immigrants, not the Black people that it was meant to, give some sort of, I guess, land and money and, resources back to. So I'm not a scholar, and I just, like I said, get frustrated when we spend a lot of time talking about what we can't do, when the reality is we have been running governments, we have been raising white people's children, we have been running their farms, we have been running their businesses and all of these things, but we're only allowed to do it in the shadows. We're only allowed to do it, to invent and innovate and do things under the names and behind the scenes of white people in this country. And we're never given our credit. We're never given our due. And we don't even know between us what we actually are capable of.
Okay. All right. You can respond first, y'all.
First, I want to say we have to understand there is a distinct difference between reparations and what I've come to identify as prosperity politics. If you go back to people like Samori Grace, the elder, or Bill Grace, and the late Dr. Conrad Royal, reparations means restoring people to the state that they were in prior to the offense or the atrocity that they're seeking reparations for. If you have someone who is in the reparations movement but does not seek to address U.S. imperialism, the rape and destruction of ecosystems, and the destruction of the oppressive hierarchical systems, there are many people relatively new to the reparation struggle who have displaced the original reparation activists, who only see reparations as an opportunity to integrate African people into the larger economy, to give Black people the material resources to better integrate and engage in capitalist economic accumulation. That is not reparations. We've already had one major integrationist movement. It was a political integration. It was social integration. And we see how that is played out. And now we're seeking economic integration. So all I'm saying is, if you are not anti-colonial, pan-African revolutionary liberationist, if you are not socialist, if you are pro-capitalist accumulation, if you are capitalist, you are not for reparations. You are for prosperity politics. You are not for liberation. You are for economic integration. So that's the first thing of it being watered down. The second thing is, we have the same ultimate goal: freedom and a space for African people to live with dignity, to pursue our interests, to cultivate our potential without the ongoing atrocities and pressures and exploitation. We have the same goals. And so what we have, when you have a path to that goal, securing territory, securing monetary reparations, when you have a path to that goal, you have to critique that path. We're not saying that Black people don't have the capacity to do things. We understand that African people have the capacity to manage a state. But what we have to understand is the ability to manage the state with the existing political relationships and the existing neoliberal global economic system that dominates the world. So do we have a capacity to operate the state in such a manner that it can stop the destruction of the earth ecosystems, the subversion of the sovereign will of people within that state? So it's not necessarily saying what we can't do. It's radically critiquing and dissecting the efficacy of any plan or agenda, and that is showing respect for that agenda, not dismissal of it.
Go ahead, Jared. I know we have to wrap up soon.
Yeah, because unfortunately I do have to wrap. But I appreciate the question, and first of all, I appreciate the whole discussion. Thank you for hosting it. Thanks everybody for coming through, and who will see this later. I appreciate everybody. But I'll just say it this way, given the context is Malcolm, that to my knowledge, I have no memory of any specific reference, certainly not a focus, but even a reference by Malcolm to reparations as part of the political project. And I bring that up to say that similar to what I think Diallo is saying, that in absence of a total revolution that itself has to be international, does not bring about the change that would make anything that is being labeled as reparations meaningful anyway. So when I even look at the history that you're talking about, we don't have time for this right now, but I don't agree that Lincoln had any real intention of giving that land, of making people free, of allowing them to be free and sustaining themselves. That project would have collapsed or been collapsed, even if it had been allowed to expand, even if Lincoln had not been assassinated. I also don't think he was assassinated for freeing Black people. I think it was much more complicated than that. But that said, the political power required to preserve even that order was insufficient. The political organization required to impose any reparations plan, regardless of which version, is insufficient, both to get it and to sustain it. And that's what I think Malcolm and his life and example challenges us still to aspire to, that we need political power to make questions of reparations moot, to make questions of one white man's order or one, even Black president's, order moot. And that makes whatever is attained sustainable over time. And I don't think any of the popular attempts at reparations address those concerns, and they don't address the concerns that were being encouraged we address by Malcolm in his life and his work. So anyway, but I'll stop there. I know it's insufficient and we need to continue these conversations. And, I will at another time, but anyway.
Absolutely.
Did you want to say anything, Afra Sings? I don't want to just dip without you getting a chance to respond at all. I feel like that's unfair, but
and just Afra is fine.
Afra.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this, and someone asked what does extra left mean, meaning that some of my friends like Kim, which I know that y'all work with, it's just like, no, let's just burn it all down. And I'm here for that, but I don't see anybody doing that. And I can't say a whole lot of things on camera because I am in DC. I am actively on people's watch list because of who I am, my name, and who I associate with. But what I will say is, if we can't build power within the structures that we have already in place, do we have plans for how to do that? And not just plans, but like, can we have action on how to do that if you completely dismantle things? Because if we can't build power within the structures already in place so that we can actually make change, which I know, so when I said extra left, meaning I know a lot of my friends and colleagues don't believe in incrementalism, right? So if we can't build within what's in place, do we have the power to rebuild when we dismantle things? And I think those are like real practical questions that need to be addressed more so than what we can't do. What can we do? How can we actually effectively do it? Because we know that there are other Black-led nations, in the diaspora that haven't quite found that footing yet. I mean, there's some that are a few hundred years old. Like in Colombia, they've been sovereign and emancipated in Basilo de Palenque for at least 500 years. They haven't figured it all out yet. So, what's our...
I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
That's good.
So that's where I know that the issues of survival programs, dual power, mutual aid programs, that's where I think those efforts are meant to come in and fill the void of the destruction of what is, maintaining some sort of power to build up something new. But that's also sort of my point about that we brought up already about nationalisms and reparations, and I joke with my wife all the time, and that's again why I got to run, but that Panama was Colombia 5 minutes ago until the white man decided they wanted greater access to trade their stolen goods and created a whole country and then carved a hole in that to put a canal in it. So that's what I'm saying. Like with the Afro descendants and others are still struggling in that region because they've never had political power, whether it was in Panama, Colombia, or what predates Colombia. Once the Europeans got over here and the colonial process took over, we haven't had political power since. And that's sort of that's what I'm saying. So even in those sovereign spaces, it's a mess. Anyway, I meant to give you the last word, but anyway, I'm sorry.
We got to take from somewhere. We can't build from nothing. So even though we're anti-colonial, you have to take from something, from somewhere. And that's really what it comes down to, that people that don't want to give it up. So they're not going to give it to you. So you're going to take it, or what? Because you can't build from nothing. That's all I can say.
Okay. All right. Peace, everybody. I'll see you all in the morning. Thanks again for this conversation. Afro, thank you very much. Take care, everybody.
Absolutely. All right, y'all. So we definitely need to wrap up. I don't know if there's any last words about Malcolm that Diallo want to share, or even you, Afro, like if there's something that you took away from Malcolm's life. We'll wrap up with that, and then see y'all tomorrow morning on the Remix Morning Show. So go ahead. Diallo, we can start with you in Africa. You can send us on.
I'd like to recommend, this is one of the better Malcolm X for beginners. If you have a young person in your life, by Dr. Bernard Doctor. I actually got this book way back in 92, signed copy, by Doctor himself. This is an excellent text for young people. My son did eventually read. This is my son's copy, actually. I don't know where my copy of the autobiography, but my son. But if you have a child, an adolescent, it's accurate. It's well. It's like a graphic novel. So I just this book is, I think it's still available. It's Writers and Readers. There's another book by another scholar. Well, he's more of a mathematician, but he dabbles in history, called The African Holocaust for Beginners as well. And I had heard about this book, and I'm like, what? That seems childish. But I actually went to a book signing, met the author, and read the book. It's well researched and very digestible. Just if you have a young person, a 9-year-old could definitely read and digest this. And it's, like I said, it's scholarly, it's excellent, but it's put in a way that young people. So it's really a good book. I know a lot of brothers that like to give out the autobiography of Malcolm X, but if you have someone who is middle school or younger, definitely check this book out. Malcolm X for Beginners. It's one of my favorite books. I gave it to my son to read, but I took it back for myself. It is really wonderful. It would be a great gift for Malcolm X Day. And also, happy birthday to Malcolm X, and also the war correspondent Dale Jones. Go and check out, after you check out Malcolm X's, and do your ancestral ritual for Malcolm X. Make sure
And,
you
and Uncle Ho. Don't forget Uncle Ho. Don't forget Uncle Ho.
Oh yeah, Ho Chi Minh. Yeah, everybody. Shout out to everybody. All revolutionaries born. This day has a lot of potential. You know, if I was into spookism and vibrations, I'd probably say some other things. But yeah, and thank you for the opportunity. And again, I'm so sorry. I'm late. I was late today, but it was a tumultuous morning for my family. But we got it together. We're safe. We're secure. So, but again, sorry, I should have called you before. I just kind of dropped everything and ran over to the school.
No, I understand. I understand. Yeah, Yuri also, who was there with Malcolm X when they murdered him. So yes, a couple people. Go ahead, sister Afra. Your takeaways, reflections on Malcolm.
My reflections on Malcolm. Malcolm is power. He's defiance against any and everybody, including the people that he loves. And that's what that's what he means. You know, that's what he means to me. I think being fierce and always seeking the truth, always seeking answers, always seeking solutions, never being afraid to back down from anybody. That's what Malcolm X means to me. His I will say I just lost my grandmother recently. She passed away in March 99, and she from Brooklyn. She studied under Betty Shabazz for years. That was her professor and her mentor, and she's from Barbados. So you know, our family has been somewhat connected in some ways. You know, and I had influences from them for most of my childhood. My father was definitely somebody that followed the Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X, and that's part of how I got my name. So Malcolm means a lot to me, and I think that we have to never we don't want to deify people, because people are fallible. You know, people have flaws, but he's a beautiful spirited man, and he definitely inspires me today still.
Absolutely. Well, we thank y'all for coming through, and thank you for being a honored guest. It sounded like I think I did remember you on Kim's show, and I was like, she sounds like she's from the South, so I remember you now. So,
oh no, I'm from Brooklyn, but I have
yeah,
not been to the U.S.
No, I remember y'all said that. I was like, she from the South. You're like, no, I'm not from the South, but so yeah, we still
Thank
from
you.
the South somehow. Before we migrated and went up north, we was down there somewhere. But anyway, I appreciate y'all, and we will definitely see y'all tomorrow. Again, thank you for tuning in. See y'all later.